Good afternoon again, everyone. I am Karen Meiji Aquino and I will be discussing the next topic, which is the information processing theory. So, it is a cognitive theory that focuses on how information is encoded into our memory. It was developed by American psychologists, including George Miller in the 1950s. The theory describes how our brains filter information from what we're paying attention to in the present moment, to what gets stored in our short term or working memory, and ultimately into our long term memory. So, it is another theory that has been used to explain children's cognitive development. And basically, this theory describes how children retain, organize, and use information habang sila ay nag-aaral at kung paano nagbabago ang kanilang mga kakayahan over the course in their cognitive development. Also, ang teoryang ito ay nagpapakita ng kakayahan ng isang bata on how they consume, digest, and regurgitate information. Accordingly, ang mga children ay kumukuha ng inputs from their experiences and process them internally and create behavioral outputs. For example, a 4-year-old child can remember what she did at Christmas and tell her friend about it when she returns to preschool after the holiday. In that way, children can recognize previously encountered information, recall old information, and reconstruct it in the present. So let's move on to the major features of information processing theory. So this is the illustration of cognitive information process memory model. So this is not one single theory but a generic term used to describe all the perspectives that focus how our cognitive process such as attention, perception, encoding, storage, and retrieval of knowledge. It uses a two-store model na kung saan pumapasok ang mga stimuli sa sensory register at mula doon ay pupunta sa short-term memory. Dito, sa pamamagitan ng rehearsal at pag-encode, maaari silang maimbak sa long-term memory. So let's move on to the next slide. Although this theory doesn't occur developmental stages, but we have systems or stages in our memory which are responsible for transferring information from one stage to the next. First, we have the sensory memory. It holds information associated with the senses, for example, vision, hearing, just long enough for the information to be processed further or mere seconds. So it refers to what we are experiencing through our senses at any given moment. Kabilang dito ang ating mga nakikita, naririnig, nahahawakan, nalalasahan at naamoy. So sensory memory is an ultra short-term memory and decays or degrades very quickly, typically in 1.5 seconds after the perception of an item. Indeed, ito ay tumatagal para sa isang maikling panahon na ito ay madalas na itinuturing na bahagi ng proseso ng pangunawa, but it nevertheless represents an essential step para sa pag-imbak ng impormasyon sa panandaliang memorya. For example, if a child eats something that once made him sick, to his stomach, for example, is the unripe mango, he will have vomiting the next time he eats that food. This is an evolutionary advantage that helps a child avoid poisonous foods by remembering things that may be harmful. So next, we have the short-term memory. Working memory holds information for a limited amount of time and holds a limited amount of information. So it is also known as working memory. It involves our brain selecting information, processing it, assigning it a meaning, and then deciding which pieces to bank in our long-term memory and which to forget. It refers to the ability to recall and process small amounts of information for up to 1 minute. Ito ay ginagamit ng mga students to recall for a variety of skills needed for school success. So, for example, the teacher gave a following instruction. So, in that way, students must be able to recall spoken instructions from teacher to be able to perform tasks what were asked of them. So, working memory is an important skill for a student to strengthen. Bagamat ang bawat isa ay nagtataglay nito in some degree, those who actively work to improve it and excel at it can benefit greatly academically. And the last is we have the long-term memory. Represents our permanent storehouse of information capable of retaining an unlimited amount and variety of information. So, while our long-term memory has unlimited space, unlike our sensory and working memories, its effectiveness comes down to how well the information in it is organized. Nagmumula ito sa kung paano nag-encode ang ating utak into the pieces of information. So, ang long-term memory can store information indefinitely. We can move skills and knowledge into long-term memory by repeatedly practicing and using them. So, ang background knowledge at vocabulary na naka-imbak sa long-term memory ay nagbibigay sa mag-aaral ng strong foundation para sa kanilang mga takdang aralin sa pagbasa o sa pagsulat. Next, we have the process of information. So, we don't need just pay attention to the memory system but also to the processes that keep information alive or help transfer it from one memory stage to the next. First, we have this selective attention. So, it refers to the learner's ability to select and process certain information while simultaneously ignoring other information. For example, the child tends to pick up a toy, examine it momentarily, set it down, and move on to another toy, without really taking the time to play with anything. Overly selective attention means that your child is focused on something other than the assigned task. The second, we have the chunking. So it is the process into the short-term memory or working memory that increase the capacity through creating larger bits. So Miller presented the idea that short-term memory could only hold 5 to 9 chunks of information, where a chunk is any meaningful unit. So, for example, the most common example of chunking is the telephone number. Remembering 10 digits, such as 54155532226, is hardly possible. But if the 10 digits are chunked into 3 units, it will be 541-555-3226. Remembering all 10 numbers is easily done. So the third is the rehearsal. So it refers to the manipulation of information currently stored in working memory. Students are focused on this information and need to interact with it in some way or it is forgotten. So the fourth is we have the encoding. So it refers to the process of relating incoming information to concepts and ideas already in memory in such a way that the new material is more memorable. So for example, when a child first learns new skills such as riding a bike, you have to put forth effort and attention to encode information about how to start to push the pedals while at the same time lifting rear in onto seat, how to brake, how to handle a turn, and so on. So once you know how to ride a bike, you can encode additional information about this skill automatically. The process of retrieval from long-term memory includes bringing to mind previously learned information to either understand some new input, make a response, making response, and may involve either recall or recognition. This is the theory that teachers should really be familiar with in order to allow students to better comprehend the lessons being taught dahil mahalaga para sa mga guro na malaman kung paano isinasa loob ng mga bata ang impormasyon. So also, teachers should know that from this theory of information processing ay ang dating kaalaman ay nakakaapekto sa kung paano pinoproseso ang impormasyon at nang may mga limitasyon sa kung gaano karaming impormasyon ang maaaring iproseso ng isang bata o estudyante sa isang partikular na oras. So, this theory also allows an individual or student to understand how they best obtain and retain knowledge.
So, I am Joanny Carmina po and I am the discussant for this topic, which is the teaching implications of information processing theory. So, in this po, of course po, in teaching, as a future educator, it is important to know this theory in order for us to identify and know more our students' abilities, or when it comes on processing some information in their brain, or what are some ways on how to improve or develop our teaching method or strategy in order for us to motivate and continuously help them to easily process some incoming information on their mind in the classroom. So, aside from that po, we can also make suggestions about a student using metacognitive strategies na maaari din po natin gamitin in terms of teaching. Gaya po ng first is identify one's own learning materials in teaching or styles and needs ng mga students po natin sa classroom or sa school. We can also plan for a task o yung mga activities po, organize our materials in teaching, arrange a study space, monitor their mistakes, and also evaluate task success for our learners. To somehow po empower students to think about their own thinking, and also this awareness of the learning process can somehow then enhance their control over their own learning or thinking. And also po, as a future educators, we can also teach our learners some skills to stay active in working memory or in ways to storage the information po in their LTM or long-term memory. So, which those po can somehow help them develop and improve their mind and kind of thinking. Like for example po, we can encourage them for active reading like stories, poem, and try other games that use visual memory. So, on the other hand naman po, in case naman po na we encounter some students naman po with some behavior problems or mental disorder condition like for example this ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity, na minsan po is pwede po tayo maka-encounter ng mga ganitong learners po na kung saan po is nahihirapan sila mag-focus or maka-absorb ng mga information sa mind nila. And ito po yung mga following na naapektuhan sa mga bata po na may ganun pong condition. One is their non-verbal working memory. Ito po yung ability nila to code, store, and recover some informations po about the faces, shapes, images, songs, sounds, smells, tastes, and feelings. Next po is their verbal working memory or yun po yung ability nila to remember something and perform an activity using this memory. The next po is their self-regulation of affect or motivation and arousal or ito po yung feelings nila or emotions po na naapektuhan din po. And lastly po is their reconstitution or yun po yung it refers to the verbal and non-verbal analysis or synthesis skills that contribute to the flexibility and creativity necessary for planning solutions. So, in case naman po na maka-encounter nga po tayo ng mga gantong learners na mayroon po mental conditions or disorder like the ADHD, is ito po yung mga tamang approach po sa kanila or pagdidisiplina po. Next po is, first po is, rules and instructions provided to students with ADHD must be clear, brief, and often delivered through more visible and external modes of presentation than is required for the management of typical children. So yun nga po is, dapat po daw is malinaw yung mga binibigay nating mga rules and instructions para sa mga students po na may ADHD. Para unti-unti po nila ma-process or ma-absorb ng utak nila yung mga bibigay nating informations po sa kanila. Next po is consequences must be delivered immediately and more frequently, not more swiftly to children with ADHD in view of their motivational deficits. So, when we have children po or students with ADHD is we must need some different approach po to discipline them. So, na magsisilbi po itong tools or guide sa kanila para ma-manage nila or natin yung behavior nila in case po nasunumpong sila. So, we can provide some positive attention po. Yung positive lang po yung attention na binibigay natin. We can give them some effective instructions, praise our students' effort po, maliit man po o malaki, and ignore na lang po natin yung mga mild misbehaviors nila. Next po is the consequences used for children must be often be of higher magnitude or more powerful than that needed to manage the behavior of typical children. So dito naman po is sa pag-handle nga po ng mga students na may ADHD is kung minsan po sumasobra na sila or nahihirapan na po sila on tayon yung mga behavior nila is dapat po i-punish na natin po sila para magkaroon sila ng takot sa atin or wag na natin i-tolerate yung mga ganong pagsobra na po yung behavior nila. So next po is an appropriate and often richer degree of incentives must be provided within a setting or task to reinforce appropriate behavior before punishment can be implemented. So dapat po sa paggawa o bago tayo gumawa ng mga task activities po sa mga students natin na may ADHD is dapat po is nagpo-provide din tayo ng mga incentives or yung mga bagay po na makakapag-motivate sa kanila na gawin yung mga task na papagawa natin. Nang sa gayon po is lalo po silang ma-encourage po na gawin yun. Gaya po ng pagbibigay po ng reward pag nakompleto po nila yun o natapos po nila agad. Yun po. So next po is the reinforces or particular rewards that are employed must be changed or related more frequently for children with ADHD than for typical children. So yun nga po. Dahil nga po iba po yung mga students with ADHD sa typical na children o mga learners. So dapat po is yun nga po, yung sa mga binibigyan nating incentives sa mga learners natin is dapat nag-iisip din po tayo na mas effective and efficient ways po on how to motivate them ng mga learners po na may ADHD. The next po is anticipation is the key with the children with ADHD. So dito po is dapat po is a teacher or teacher educator is aware tayo sa mga anumang consequences sa pag-handle sa mga batang may gantong mental condition. So dapat din po is nag-isip po tayo ng mga plan or tactics on how to handle and motivate or how to handle them effectively and appropriately. So next po is children with ADHD must be held more publicly accountable for their behavior and goal attainment than a typical children. So yun nga po, dapat din daw po is nag-iisip po tayo ng mga interventions or accommodation po para our students po na may ADHD. Like for instance po, is magpo-provide po ng additional time para po makompleto po nila yung mga task na assignments nila. Kasi po, iba po kasi sila sa mga typical na students po, nahihirapan sila mag-focus. So dapat po is mas binibigyan po sila ng maraming oras. Pwede po din na in class, dapat itabi po natin sila sa mga attentive na classmates nila para lalo po silang ma-encourage o makapag-focus with their tasks and other activities. And lastly po, some behavioral problems po or those some behavioral intervention po, must only work syempre pag nagawa na natin sila or na-apply na natin sa mga learners po natin. Yun po. Thank you po.
Good day everyone, I'm Cyrus Brian P. Marasigan and I am the next reporter, and my topic is all about identify teaching strategies that facilitate the storing and receiving of information. So, allow extra classroom time to process information. Student with slow process speed can struggle in class in a lot of ways. So, that might be trouble keeping in class and participating in discussion or staying focused. Processing speed is found not be enough to qualify students for an IEP, but that doesn't mean they can use classroom accommodation anyway. So, here are some strategies that teachers can use to help kids with slow processing speed. So, giving instruction and assignments, and check in from time to time to make sure the student understand the lesson. Give the student extra time to respond to question in class. So bigyan ng time ang mga bata para makapag-isip ng ayos and para makasagot ng ayos. Next is give simple written direction and speak slowly when giving oral direction. Use paragraph and other visual aids and explain out loud with they mean. So mas makakabuting gumamit ng mga visual aids para mas madaling maintindihan ng mga bata. Next, allow extra time for test. So bakit nga ba inaalaw ang extra time for test? For most test takers, the standard extension is the time and 1/2. This means that for a test that normally takes 60 minutes, a student may be allowed 90 minutes. Double time may also be allowed. Sometimes, the student is allowed to take breaks when individually needed. And especially dun sa mga may anxiety or mental health disorder. So next is teach student how to self-talk. So self-talk is the inner voice that goes inside our heads throughout our waking hours. Positive self-talk is when we talk ourselves in reassuring, kind, and more optimistic way. Positive self-talk can have a big impact on how we think and feel. Over time, engaging in more positive self-talk can help reduce stress, improve self-esteem, increase motivation, inspire productivity, and improve overall mental and physical health. So napakahalaga pala nito sa ating sarili dahil nakakaalis din ito ng stress at nakaka-improve ng self-esteem. So next one is help them problem solve. So children use problem solving skills on a constant basis when they experiment and investigate. So when they select materials and when they try to work together. So sa simpleng paraan para matulungan natin ang mga bata na mag-solve ng mga problem. So guide first syempre. And next is help them remember routine. So paano nga ba natin matutulungan ang mga bata upang hindi makalimutan ang gawain nila sa pang-araw-araw. So like for example, dapat po natin lagi silang papaalalahanan, at habang tumatagal ay natututunan na din nilang ah, ang mga pang-araw-araw na gawain nila. Like for example, pagising ng maagap sa araw ng pagpasok sa school, pag-toothbrush bago matulog. And next is step by step approach pencil. So yun, kung tuturuan natin kung paano mag step by step, kung paano magguhit gamit ang lapis. So next, teach step in the same sequence. How to sequence skills to children. Sequencing is the skills that we use when we break down an event into simple steps and put those steps in order. We need sequencing skills to talk about something that happened in the past in a logical manner so other can follow the story. And student is proficient in basic life support techniques, and paramedic student is proficient advanced life support techniques. So dapat may goals tayo sa buhay. Like for example, napili kang badminton player sa inyong klase, so you need is more practice para sa oras ng laban hindi ka mahirapan dahil nakapag-practice ka. So that is practice skills. Next is reteach skills. Reteach skills is an essential part of instructional that promotes student learning and motivation. So, kailangan natin tanungin yung mga bata kung saan ba sila nahirapan, and then ipapaliwanag natin ng mas malinaw or maayos sa mga bata, and after nun, saka natin gawin ang simple assessment para malaman natin kung saan ba sila mas magiging magaling. So next is overlearn skills. It's the process of rehearsing a skills even after you no longer improve. So lahat naman ng bagay is nagsisimula sa mahirap, at lahat din ng bagay ay napag-aaralan. Basta wag lang tayo mawala ng tiyaga, o wag lang mawala sa atin ang tiyaga at pagsisikap. So that's all, and hope you learned something about this short video. Goodbye, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Raven LR and I am the next discussant. So my topic is all about the continuation of teaching strategies that facilitate the storing and receiving of information. So next is breaking up information into smaller parts. So this is the teaching strategies today to reduce too much content. It will help the student to understand and manage the information properly. So dito so sabi nga nire-reduce or mas parang sinasummarize na lang yung mahabang topic para mas lalong maintindihan ng mga bata. Also, it will give the student plenty of break and opportunity to process the information from short-term to long-term memory. So dito mas lalong maintindihan nila at tatatak sa kanilang isipan. So example nito yung bawa yung guro, binabasa niya yung aklat. So through that mas pinapaikli niya, kinukuha niya na lang yung main ideas, at yun, mas pinapalawak niya na lang yung pagpapaliwalag doon sa main ideas para mas maintindihan ng bata. So dito mas maintindihan ng bata yung lecture ng teacher. So next is make it meaningful. So teacher are more likely to retain information that meaningful to them. So dito mas importante sa mga guro na magbigay sila ng mas more an example para mas maging meaningful yung kanilang pinapaliwanag. So kinokonekta nila ito sa kanilang personal experiences or real life situation para mas lalong maintindihan ng bata at mag-process sa kanilang utak. Uy, bawa ko ganito pala to, ganito pa yun. So next is use scenarios and simulation to access previously learned subject matter. So this is teaching strategies to broaden the student reasoning skills and insight between what they stored in their long-term memory. So dito mas mas maintindihan nila kung may mga scenario. So, mas matatandaan nila yung information kapag sila ang gagawa ng based on sa kanilang nakikita or na obserban sa mga halimbawa sa pagluluto, nagpagawa ng activity ang teacher sa pagluluto, kung paano magluto. So dito ilalagay ng bata yung mga step or procedure kung paano lutuin yun. Tapos another example is yung actual, yung mas makikita nila kung paano gawin or lutuin yung kung anong gagawin nilang activity. So dito mas maiintindihan at mas hindi malilimutan ng bata yung experience na natutunan niya. So next is integrate stories that trigger an emotional connection. So this kind of teaching strategies enable the student to create an emotional connection with the subject matter and store it away in their long-term memory. So dito parang mas magbibigay ang teacher ng example na connected din sa personal experience ng bata, at dito mas maiintindihan nila dahil na-experience nila yung ganong bagay. So tatak sa kanilang magiging emotional yun at makakapag-share sila ng kanilang mga experiences na about din dun sa topic na nabanggit. So next is practice. So this is simplest way to encode new facts in long-term memory. It is to present it more than once, repeating information in different format, verbal, written, visual, tactile. So dito, yung teaching strategies, kalimitan nakikita natin ito paminsan. Sa unang turo nila, parang ginagawa, verbal muna, tapos sa susunod, papagawin tayo ng mga written or essay. So dito, nare-repeat natin yung na-tackled na information ng teachers. So it is also a strategy to boost learning retention, to recall some information to process or moving information from the short term to long term memory. So dito mas maintindihan nga ng bata kasi nare-recall yung previous knowledge niya. So next is connect the dots. So connect the dots is to optimize the chances of material being retained in long-term memory. You should layer the material by providing sufficient background information and connecting the current lesson. Parang ganito rin to yung parang recall na rin to kasi parang binabalik lang ng teacher yung previous knowledge ng bata, parang kinoconnect lang doon sa currently topic nila para mas maintindihan at tumatak sa isip ng bata yung information. So that malalaman natin kung may natutunan ba siya sa previous knowledge niya. Next is highlights important information. Teachers, this is teaching strategies. They highlight information ideas of our particular term. This is a strategy to emphasize which parts of the text are the keyword or main ideas. So for example, ito yung when I was high school, so some teachers are using different color of chalk while they're summarizing the text, so that nakikita namin yung main idea kasi iba ang kulay or may highlight na kagad yung main idea ng particular na topic. So yun, mas tatatak sa amin yun kasi mas maintindihan namin yun dahil yung main idea ang pinupunto ng teacher. Next is engaging multiple senses. So this is a strategy to visual successfully performing tasks with audio and visual aids that reflect real life situation. So yun nga, yung parang nagbibigay ng mga audio and visual aid para mas maging kabuluhan yung lecture ng teacher, mas maiintindihan nila or ma-realize nila na parang nangyayari ito talaga sa real life situation. Yung parang yung mga napapanood nila nangyayari din sa realistic. next is active participation. So this is a strategy to know if your students are copying information in your lecture. So dito, active participation, malalaman natin kung may sarili silang idea about dun sa topic at mas madadagdagan natin yun. So madadagdagan or maliliwanag natin, clarify natin sa kanila yung kung ano yung tama na definition ng isang bagay. Parang ganun. So that's all my report. Thank you.
For our summary of concerns, first, we have Lev Vygotsky's sociocultural theory of cognitive development refers to the process of an individual develop more systematic, logical, and rational concepts from their social interactions with the help of a teacher or a peer who is more skilled in the subject, and how culture affects a great deal to their development. Second, the major terms and concepts related to sociocultural theory of the cognitive development was the more knowledgeable other, or the MKO, zone of proximal development, CVD, social interaction, and the language. Also, we have teaching applications for sociocultural theory of cognitive development refers to the reciprocal teaching that leads in thinking aloud and discussions of thought, aid in clarification and revision of thinking and learning, therefore development cognition. We have information processing is how individuals perceive, analyze, manipulate, use, and remember informations. It represents the flow of information by the basic components of memory stages, which are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. There are also processes that keep information alive or help transfer it from the memory stages to the next. It is the attention, rehearsal, chunking, encoding, and retrieval. We have also teaching implication for information processing theory. Can somehow help the teachers modify teaching and learning environment to facilitate direct a student attention and perception to the incoming information, and in case they encounter some learners with learning and behavior problems. Also, what are the four executive functions, including the nonverbal working memory, verbal working memory, self-regulation of affective motivation, arousal, and reconstitutions. Also, teaching strategies help students begin to understand the process of learning in short-term or long-term memory. It will help students to bypass their areas of weakness and to perform at the level at which they are capable. Strategies promote flexible thinking and teach students the importance of shifting their approaches to different tasks. For our conclusions, Vygotsky's sociocultural theory views human development as a socially mediated process in which children acquire their cultural values, beliefs, and problem-solving strategies through collaborative dialogues with more knowledgeable members of the society. Vygotsky theory is comprised of concepts such as cultural specific tools, private speech, and zone of proximal development. Our information processing theory can be also used to enhance the learning opportunities for students. Although the theory does not provide a complete justification for learning, it offers some insights into how our students perceive, remember, retrieve, and process informations. This theory suggests that the key to learning is encoding, transferring knowledge permanently into long-term memory. The challenge to every teacher with this has to be proficient in modeling these strategies to the students and then gradually fade away and let the students take over the control of their learning. And last, to be successful, the teacher focus must be on teaching strategies that might help to facilitate the storing and receiving information to the students. We provided here the references where we cited the information we shared to all of you. If you have time, you can visit our provided link here and have more readings. Here are the reporters who presented their topic. First is Miss Isel de la Cruz. Second, Miss Isel Rochi. Third, Miss Jessica Esperanza. Fourth, Miss Karen Main Aquino. Fifth, Miss Carmina Zuaini. We have also Mr. Cyrus Brian Marisigan, Raven Parr, and Ma'am Miriam Abayon. And we think that's all for us. Thank you for stay tuned and listening with our report. And if you have any question or clarification, you can message us in our GC or in our personal accounts. So we all hope you were keeping safe, stay hydrated, and God bless everyone. Bye-bye!